Hi, everyone. I can't believe it's been over a year since we launched 3 new Classical Conversations podcasts. And now we want to hear from you on how we are doing. In this episode's description, you'll find a link that will take you to a quick survey where you can let us know what you like about our podcast and what we can improve upon. Plus, if you have any recommendations for guests you'd like to hear on an upcoming episode, we would love to hear those too. Again, you can find that survey's link in today's episode's description. Thanks in advance for taking the time to help us best serve you through our podcasts.
Classical Conversation Studios presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortons, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Refining Rhetoric. Today, my guest is Andrew Chambers. Andrew is the head of campus life at Excel College, a private Christian college in the North Carolina mountains that takes a Christ-centered, practical approach to higher education, helping students to build a life, not just a living. Starting with Excel in 2017, Andrew is passionate about seeing students rise to their God-given potential to serve the world around them. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Now, Excel College is in a beautiful part of North Carolina, and your slogan is learn to build a life, not just a living. So tell me a little bit about the philosophy behind that statement and how you guys live that out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So our whole thing is that most traditional colleges will focus on two things. They'll focus on intellectual development and maybe professional development. So they'll learn how to make a living. So, I grew up with a dad saying you got to get a JOB so you can EAT so you don't DIE. And and I loved it. And that's what most people go to college for. But our whole thing is if you're a whole person, and I'm more than just my job, although what I do comes out of who I am and it's an important part of who I am, then you should educate the whole person. So I tell students here, when you graduate, we are just as concerned that you know how to build a healthy marriage and family as we are that you get a great job. And we actually think having a great job is part of that. And so that's the whole thing is we want you to learn how to build a life, not just make a living. So shout out to Andy Mineo. He's a Christian rapper that I actually stole that from. So
That's great.
Yeah.
No, I love that. I don't think when I went to Clemson University, that was something they cared about, my future marriages or child rearing or any of those things. They just, an excellent engineering school, though, they say. We've been involved at Classical Conversations with Excel from the beginning. We've sent a lot of students to your institution, but you and your wife, I believe, are involved with Excel. So how did that happen, and what really drew you all to this unique program?
Yeah. So my wife, Charity, is our academic coordinator now, and she actually went through as a student about 10 years ago. So I'm like you. I went to University of Memphis, so I went to kind of traditional school. So I came in involved more on the more to help out with some marketing, discipleship, and more on the marketplace sides because they were really starting to dive in. We were really starting to dive into some marketplace stuff when I came in. And Charity actually came in, went through as a student, and then finished her degree at Grove City College back in the day, and then actually came in to facilitate. And so we connected in 2017 and got married soon after. So
it's always fun to hear how people met and got married. What do you see really with Excel College? You guys say you've abandoned lectures, discarded textbooks, and reimagined the possibility of the classroom. So what does that mean for the student's experience? What does that look like?
Yeah. So, and I can, I guess, so we have two phases, right? So we have that core phase and the practicum phase. So I can talk about it, what it means just from the core standpoint right now, or from both, or how do you want to?
Well, let's break that down. What is the core phase and what's the practicum phase? I mean, our listeners may know what a practicum is, or at least what we use it as at Classical Conversations.
Yes.
But
yeah. So we have a different practicum than the CC practicums, but if you're in North Carolina, we'll see you at one of those this year probably. So so essentially, what we do is we kind of merge the classical and the practical. And so And it's funny because, Bob Rose, that y'all CIO, we actually were at his house during the national conference. And he's an information technology guy, and he's talking to students about like the history of math and like the theology of math. And he's leading a Challenge 4 group. And so for me, that's like a perfect picture of this like perfect, like really natural, practical, and also very classical and intellectual person. And so it's the same way with us. And so most colleges, they'll fall in two ditches. One, they'll just hit on the liberal arts and not have any practical training, or they'll just do the practical and throw away the liberal arts. But our whole thing is like, initially college was supposed to form wise, mature leaders for tomorrow. And then I'm sure you've had somebody on talking about this, but it got into the skills training game and the Industrial Revolution, which it didn't belong in. And so our thing is like, what if we actually took it back to its original purpose of still having that forming your character, wisdom, Christ-like maturity, and then also gave you those practical skills. And so in the core phase, we focus on the liberal arts, and we start with critical thinking, then we start with theology, and then we go all the way through up into anthropology, economics, government, fine arts. And, Socratic, just like CC guys do. And students really learn. That's what I say, like students are actually starting, and we do all that through a biblical narrative. And so that's where I say students are really learning, like, what is this story that I'm living in? And what is this imago Dei that I'm carrying? And like, who has God made humanity to be? Like, what's our calling as humans? That's what we take care of during the core. And then after you do that, you can start asking the question, okay, now where do I fit into this thing? So once you figure out the story you're living in, then you can say, where do I fit into this thing? And that's where we can start talking about like, instead of just saying, hey, what major, when we say major, we don't mean just like, what career do you want to do for the next 40 years? We mean like, how's God made you? What are the passions that you have? What are the skills that you have? What are you good at? What do you like to do? And, a lot of people, especially, you guys work with teens a lot. There's this sometimes paralysis analysis of like, what's God calling me to do? Like, I want to make sure I make the right decision and go in the right way. And we absolutely believe God's given everyone a calling, but sometimes our calling is just as much about how he's wired us and how he's made us as it is about the specific career field or the specific person that he wants us to marry. And
how do you help students figure those things out?
Yeah, so that's actually a huge part of our program. So they're working the whole time they're in the core phase. They're actually working in the marketplace. They're living in homes. They've got coaches and mentors, and we have some personality tests. We use strengths finders in the disc. But we're really, that whole first phase is really figuring out like, what are you good at? What are you about? Like, what makes you come alive? What makes you what takes you off? And then going into that second phase, they've had 15 months. So they don't declare majors right when they come in. So they go through those.
So everyone's taking the same courses, a core set of courses.
Yep. Everyone's taking that core set of courses together, living in homes together. Our faculty and staff live on campus. We're 5 minutes outside of downtown Black Mountain. So we're just in an environment that really gives like rise to what you like and who you are kind of coming out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so we have a career fair midway through the core. We have different employers come in and present, and students just start thinking like, okay, I like to do this, or hey, I might want to go into sales. And then we'll say, well, your personality test says that you're a high introvert and you're really good at efficiency and detail. Like, is sales your thing?
Yeah.
And sitting down and helping them figure it out. And so when they get into phase 2, they go into actual like apprenticeships or internships and are getting hands-on experience in the job or in the field that they want to go into. And what we communicate to them is, hey, you're trying to build marketable skills right now. This is not necessarily your 40-year job. If it is, that's awesome. But let's take that pressure off. And like, what are the skills you need to succeed to do well in the crafts that you want to go into? So
you said they eventually do declare a major. So do they kind of have different groups after that first core set of classes that they break off into? And then do they go into new homes or they're living together, or are they still kind of more autonomous then?
Oh yeah, great question. Okay, let me give like a general overview of the campus life. So what we do is when they come in, we've got a community center college meets in Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We actually have a CC group meeting there on Tuesdays, and then we have another like arts and activities program on Thursdays. And so this is holistic kind of family style thing. Our whole thing is multi-generational. So faculty and staff live on campus. So students, they live in homes. They have what's called a house captain, which is essentially like an RA, but also for discipleship. And like really wanting to see you come alive spiritually, practically, professionally, missionally, emotionally, intellectually. So they're in homes of 10 to 12 students, like living in rooms. They have a kitchen. They have to cook while they're here. They have to learn to clean and take care of a home. And so, and that's actually part of the whole experience. So it's funny because when a new class comes in for the first 3 months, it's like the rice is a little burnt. You got to throw the chicken back in the oven, make sure it's not raw. And then
Yeah.
by the end, it's like, they're excellent. Um, so after that first phase, they stay in those homes, and it's, you can consider phase 2 seniors and phase 1, freshman, sophomore area. You can, if you were just using kind of normal terms. And so they stay in those same home, and those phase 2 guys really start taking responsibility for showing the phase 1 guys the ropes. But then instead of being in the classroom, what happens is the classroom moves to the marketplace. And so for example, I've got a girl here named Emma. She came from Minnesota. She did really well in the liberal arts classroom, and then she wants to get into business management. And so she's actually doing data analytics with Sunbelt Rentals out of Charlotte.
Okay.
And they're allowed.
And are they doing that remote or in person or both?
So she's remote most of the time, and she has to go in like once every couple of weeks.
Okay.
And so all of our stuff is actually here around Black Mountain, because that life on life discipleship is huge to us. Luckily right now there's a lot of businesses that are allowing employees to work remote, so we have people like Emma doing that. But we've got other guys here that are doing construction, or they're doing culinary arts, and they're working at businesses around town. So
yeah, I know a lot of times, a lot of business leaders listen to this show. They're always asking me, yeah, how do we hire students? How do we get interns? How do we do? So it sounds like you guys have opportunities for people remotely or in the Black Mountain area to provide internship and work opportunities for students who may or not have been through classical conversations, but are probably a lot like our students in many ways because of the education y'all are providing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be curious when business leaders, because I think we probably get the same fact when they ask you why do they tell you they want your students? I bet I know why.
I mean, there's probably two reasons. One, just practically, they see the other students.
Yeah.
They know what they're getting from the universities that they graduated from, or those modern big institutions. And secondly, the world's changing so fast. They need people who know how to think, who have a historical perspective, who can embrace the challenges of tomorrow. And when you've provided students with an education that is looking at the whole span of history, what are the best thoughts? How do you figure those things out? How do you have those rhetorical skills to engage in debate and conversation around, okay, Plato said this, Aristotle said that, Obama said this, Trump said that. How do we say what's the best, what worked well, what has stood the test of time, and really think through those things in a logical manner? And so, you've seen logic get abandoned by modern education, and you've seen those rhetorical skills, and those are two things that anyone can use in any field. So it's always interesting because you hear Elon Musk always talk about trying to hire liberal arts majors because he can teach them how to do the math, but he can't teach teaching those skills is much more difficult.
Totally. And we get the same thing. I like because I do our employer networking here in town, and I've asked employers, like, what are you looking for from our students? And they're saying, show up on time, care, be able to talk to them, customers well, be able to receive feedback and learn. And I think that's what sets a lot of y'all students apart, and ours is that, like, the ability to critically think so they can learn things on the job, but also the character and integrity to show up and do well and like honor their employers and be great employees. So
Yeah, it's amazing how much showing up on time
Yeah,
matters.
yeah. Sadly, but yeah.
Now it sounds like they're working and they're living life. So we know that student loans is a big crisis here in the United States. We've subsidized every uh, person who's wanted to go to college, whether they had a path to paying off the student loans or were even capable of finishing the 4 year or 2 year degree. What's it like at Excel College? Are your students graduating with a lot of debt, or because of how you've arranged it, they're able to, pay for a lot of it themselves?
Yeah, great question. So that student loan crisis is like $1.6 trillion. Um, now there's a lot of legislation through on trying to change some of that. We'll see what happens. But
It'll go from a student loan crisis to a debt ceiling
yeah,
crisis.
exactly.
We're just changing the name of the crisis.
and and yeah, we just don't think that's responsible. And so we have a commitment for students to graduate debt free. So have this thing we say no loans, no debt. And but at the same time, we're not subsidized, and education cost. And so what we've done is we've built a three-way model to where students, all of our classroom time in the core is self-contained. In the practicum, they're in apprenticeships where they're getting paid. And so during that core, they're actually required to work 20 to 25 hours a week for a couple of reasons. One, just for the work ethic and maturity that comes from holding down a job. And that's where we want them to learn how to show up, how to be great employees. And then when they're in their practicum, they can focus on building skills because they already have the maturity to do the rest. Um, but then two, also to help pay for school. So what we've done is we built a model where students pay a third of their school and they pay for all of that while they're here. Um, so if they come in with savings, they can have that. And then parents pay for a third, and then the school actually fundraises a third from people that believe in doing a new way of education and where students can graduate debt free. So it's essentially that. It's the whole thing is like we don't want to take government money, and we want students, and we want to be sustainable, and we want students to be debt free. And so that's the model we work with. And then over a 2.5 year program, it's about $50,000, which is about a third of what you're coming out of a state school with. But we know that our families we don't do the loans thing, and so that's why the student takes that greater responsibility. And then we've had to get creative around helping some parents that might not be able to afford their portion figure out how to do that. And so we started this new semester called Excel at Home semester, where they're actually doing it at home, and it's encouraging students to jump into the workforce right after high school, and they start walking through our values and virtues, which is honor, humility, hunger, and health. They walk through that curriculum while they're working in the marketplace and actually saving money to help their parents pay off their part as well. And so now I've got students that are in their practicum phase that are actually building savings accounts, and we're actually starting to talk about building credit. And I literally had a meeting with a girl this morning where I'm like, okay, like you make $20 an hour as an apprentice in college, like you're saving money. Like, what's it look like to be ready to buy a house? And that's like the biggest joy for us.
It's amazing what you can accomplish when you just throw the box away. Don't even try to live in it. Don't try to, uh, you know, act like that's part of it. And I think part of that, from our standpoint, is that whole idea of Imago Dei. We have a Father in heaven that has sheep or cattle on 1,000 hills. Like, we don't really need to worry about what the world is doing or how the world is paying for things. If we say, what would God have us do? And I just got to think the education buy-in from those students who are paying for a third of their school is significantly higher. Delise, who helps with our podcast and has Blessings in Motherhood podcast, she was telling me when she was in college, students were taking out loans to go on spring break and
Oh, man.
vacation and saying, oh, it doesn't matter. The federal government's going to forgive these one day, and I want to live it up. Your students aren't doing that?
No, no, absolutely not.
So you said 2.5 years, and I was at Clemson University. They said most of the people there were taking almost 5 years to graduate.
Yeah.
So 2.5 years, are you getting a 4-year degree and a AA, or just you've proven yourself, and we don't even care about those boxes either.
Yeah. So it's a bachelor's degree. So our status, we're in a religious exemption status with the state of North Carolina. And so what that did was it gave us the freedom to pursue our practicum program. Um, because a lot of what students do in that program is customized and tailored to them. And so it's the same. It's actually the same amount of education as a 4-year degree. But what we did was we took out the summer breaks and we took out the winter break, and they have 1 week semester breaks, and then 2 weeks of Christmas. And we did that for a couple.
So it's like it's almost like working.
Yeah, it's almost like real life. And that's why we did it, is because our whole thing is like, again, when you graduate, you're gonna be a wise, mature, productive adult who can follow Jesus into a life of flourishing, and build healthy marriage and family. And so, and you guys know this, there's a momentum that's built in education and in discipleship. And if they're paying for school and they have employers that are depending on them, they need to be here for it. And so it's actually, and we, our community, we really try to model after, like Acts 2, Jesus chose 12 to be with him. In these early Christian communities where they did life together, they're not, kind of off in the countryside being weird doing that. It's like in the middle of in the middle of town doing that. And so like you're building community, you're building family. And so we don't want to disrupt that for 3 months every year, to send people home. So
has life changed in Black Mountain? Like, are like employers like beating down your door to say, "Hey, I need workers. How can we partner with you?" Like, are you seeing a positive impact from bringing your college into Black Mountain?
Well, I guess let me tell it this way. So when COVID hit, half of our students got laid off within a week, right? Because no one knew what was going on. Within 2 weeks, they were all rehired at employers that that other students / their friends were working at. And it was essentially these other employers saying, "Oh, you got more Excel guys? We'll take them." And so I've actually gotten to a point. So we have our career fair in the core program, but before, and that's introducing them to apprenticeships for the practicum. But coming into the core, they have to get jobs. So now I've got it. Last year I had employers calling and asking if they could come to our orientation so that they could recruit.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, which is, I was like, oh, sure, yeah, come on. So we had the Biltmore there, and Ridgecrest Conference Center, and some of those bigger companies in the area that have 3,000-4,000 employees. And again, it's that, like, will they show up on time? Are they not going to do drugs while they're here? And
Yeah.
like, do they have coaches and mentors that are actually looking out for them and can help make sure they're succeeding? So
Now, how large are you all now? And then do you guys have a cap on how many students you're accepting on a annual basis? And do you start? And it sounded like you have a summer program where you can start right after you graduate now. But does most everyone else start in the fall, and then you just what does that look like?
Yeah, great question. So we start every September, and we take so we're starting to take in between 50 and 60 students a class. So we currently have 60 students on campus. And so when our next class comes in this September, that'll double our size to about 120. And that's a cap. So our plan is not to kind of start buying university buildings all over Black Mountain, but actually to try to multiply campuses and do this wherever we can across the country. So
What's that like, trying to think about multiplying yourself? Do you all do is this like a proof of concept where you're at, and you're not like a franchise that you're going to be a franchise, but trying to say, like, these are the best practices, this is how you do it, and launching? And do you have a vision for you want to go next? Do you want like an East Coast and a West Coast, or like, how are you thinking about it?
yeah, that's a great question. So, for us, it's all about DNA, right? And it's all about culture. And so, Chick-fil-A, we tell people we want to be Chick-fil-A, not McDonald's. And so McDonald's, anyone and their mom can buy a franchise and throw it up somewhere. And there's certain like logistical operating points, but as far as culture and DNA, how do you do that? Well, Chick-fil-A, you can't own a Chick-fil-A unless you've come up through Chick-fil-A, and
Right.
And they have a great leadership development program. So we actually are partnering with the Asheville area Chick-fil-A's. They want to hire some of our students and actually take them through on a store management track.
Wow.
Yeah, which
That is really cool.
yeah. I was like, really? Okay, yes, great, let's do it.
You're like, actually, I'm gonna
Um,
I'm gonna do that track.
and so our thing is like we will not multiply if we do not have the leadership that it takes to keep carrying on. Like if we do this whole program and kids graduate, they get great jobs, and they don't build healthy marriage and family, and they can't follow Jesus into like flourishing life, then we failed,
Right.
you know. And so it's as important to us to have healthy marriages and families and healthy students, more important than to have great jobs. And so, you know, we're probably shooting for trying to we have a couple sites in mind, maybe for the end of 2024. But the question is, can we do that healthily in a way that is sustainable and that we're not going to lose? You know, I've been in ministries in the past where where the ministry was awesome and it exploded, and then kind of along the way, because of that, it lost a little bit of what we were called to do, and we're not doing that here.
Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, that's always difficult as you scale to keep things tight. There's a book called Mission Drift, all about great organizations that have drifted off their mission. And of course, it's always sad. I mean, if you go to Yale or Harvard, you see all this Latin, you see all these Christian ideas and ideals, and they're bastions of atheism
Yeah,
now.
yeah. It's like, did they start like us? Because you're right. Like they came in as like it was Christians that founded these universities.
But they accepted state money. They accepted theft. I mean, people always, why do you speak out against school choice? Why are you against federal government helping people attend college? It's because I don't think, one of the 10 commandments is thou shalt not steal. God did not give the government authority over education. And so if the government is taxing you for something it doesn't have authority over, then that's theft. And I don't think God's going to honor things that are paid for through stolen goods.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know. Obviously, a number of people disagree with me. One of the things at Classical Conversations that we think about too is, how do we know that our kids are, having healthy marriages, doing these things? Because I mean, it's great to see they have good SAT scores, ACT scores, they get into good schools, they get good scholarships. But that's really surface level, 1-inch deep things. Is there anything y'all are doing to see if those healthy marriages, fruitful lives? We hear about the opioid epidemic, the depression epidemic, all of those things. Are you able to measure those things, or do you have things that you're thinking about to how to know if those students, 5, 10, 15 years down the road are continuing to live through those values you've hopefully pointed them towards?
Totally. That's a good question. We don't necessarily have like analytics in place for that kind of stuff right now. But I think what we measure is like, what's the fruit of their lives, like, and
Do y'all have like alumni things where they come back to campus and talk to students? I mean,
yeah,
I know you've only been around for, a short period of time. So you don't necessarily have 30 or 40 years of people coming back yet.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's, we're still a pretty young, organization. And so we do have students come back. Actually, we just had, the C5 class actually just had, kind of a reunion this weekend and came back and did class. And
so it's C5. What is that?
So we have, so now we're in C7 and we have C8.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are just cohort. Yeah. Cohort 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Internal lingo. And so, some of the students that were in C1 and C2, so, the 2017, 2018 are now faculty. And, Nathaniel and Nathaniel was Schmidt and Katie Platson are now Nathaniel and Katie Schmidt. And they're, living around and they're actually mentoring students now, and Isaiah, Nathaniel's brother Schmidt, and then Rochelle, Jarek are now Isaiah and Rochelle. And they're mentoring students. And so we have, I guess I didn't even think about it like that. We haven't had structured like kind of alumni gatherings, but we just have students that were here that are still models and mentors,
Yeah, I think, always, it's always fun to see for us, those students who went through who are now directing or homeschooling or have their kids, grandchildren in classical conversations from some of the, OG, moms and dads who are with us. But we've been around for over 25 years now, and we're just now getting to the point where there's enough people to kind of start measuring and looking at that more
Totally.
intensely. So,
And you'll like this. We got a girl named Natalie that's from she did CC in Virginia, and so she's actually going to help lead the Challenge B, either Challenge B or Challenge A group on our campus next year. Actually, as part of her practicum, she's going to walk through that. So
oh, awesome. What do you see, like for your practicums? Like, what type of industries or majors do you all have? So do you because I'm guessing you don't have, like, aerospace engineering. Not many colleges, not even big universities have aerospace engineering. So what are those tracks that they can take?
yeah, that's a great question. So here's what I tell people. So our whole premise is that like 80% of jobs and careers you can actually do by experience and learning the trade, and that's kind of our
At least.
at least, yeah, at least. And then you have the let's go 90%. I'll go 90. And um,
Doctors and engineers and
exactly.
maybe a couple
Yep.
others, architects.
Yep. Doctors, engineers.
We want them to be very well specifically trained.
Yes. And they need to go through, certain accredited curriculums for that, right? I mean, because you want standardization among those fields. And so what I tell people is we don't when we have a student that wants to enter a career track, we don't build a department with 8 professors and teaching assistants and all that kind of stuff to facilitate that. What we do is we find an employer that's willing to apprentice or intern them in that field. And so right now at this moment, I've got, Emma and Luke are doing data analytics. Couture is doing community and program development with Black Mountain Home for Children. She's actually doing like a lower key version of architecture and interior design. She's using SketchUp and working on a lot of our campus projects. Jeremy's doing property management and he's getting his general contractor's license. Lizzie just graduated with, she just did worship. So she actually just produced her first song. And her capstone project actually was to do a couple cover songs and then to write and produce her own song. And so her capstone event was all of us like seeing her, which is super vulnerable, but seeing her worship song that she put out. And so I say that to say we got Kate. So
Now you got to plug her song so our listeners can go hear it and download it.
Yeah. So she doesn't have it on her Spotify yet. It's actually she just put it out yesterday on our podcast first. So if you want to listen to part 2 of the Elizabeth Schneider episode on the Excel College podcast, you can hear it at the end there. So, and it's awesome. I think Faith to Fail, I think is the name of it. It's awesome. So,
all right. Well, check out the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you can hear it.
So, yeah. And then what I was going to say is, so, those industries we do those just through experience and partnerships. And then there's that, 10 to 15 to 20%, let's go to 10% that you need to go through the kind of traditional system for. So what we're doing is we're building matriculation agreements. And so one of our early ones is with AB Tech, which is it's a vocational school in town. And so Katie, one of our students, she wanted to be a paramedic, and you got to go through AB Tech to do that. And so she's actually, as her practicum, she's in paramedic school there. And so we had Matt Conlon actually graduated a couple of years ago, and he already is a paramedic now. And so he's actually working on the truck with Buncombe County. And so we got all over the spectrum. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, I appreciate you coming on the podcast today. I think it was super impressive to me that you're spitting off students' names and what they're doing. I don't know that there's many other higher educational leaders that could do that, and just really talks to the difference of an Excel College education and what you are doing to break the paradigm and graduate students in 2.5 years without student debt and forward to successful marriages, raising families, and secondarily, probably some pretty good jobs. So how do parents or employers, what's the websites to connect with you all? You mentioned a podcast. What's the name of that? How do they get to it?
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much. So theexcelcollege.com is how you get to our website. Watch out for that double E and the in Excel. You can find our podcast. Just type in the Excel College podcast, and you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere podcasts are found, or you can get there from our website as well. And you can find us. We just started hopping on YouTube and putting some of our episodes on there. So yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, and if I can, one more thing. So we actually this summer for the first time are doing a summer leadership camp.
Okay.
And we have our own critical thinking curriculum. And Matt Collin, the guy that I mentioned to you that works with Buncombe County, is doing CPR first aid training. And so we're doing camping, whitewater rafting, rock climbing, 12 days leadership development, critical thinking. And I tell students, like, if you are interested in, it's for 16 to 18-year-olds. And so we're a small school and a small community. And I tell people, like, you want to make sure this is your thing, before you commit to coming. And so that's a really good way to come and check us out and see if it's a good thing for you too. So
Awesome. All right. Well, check out Excel College, listen to their podcast, go camping and get some leadership training for high school students. And Andrew, thank you so much for all you're doing for the kingdom, and we'll see you next time.
Man, Robert, bless you guys. Thank you, man.
Man's impact on the environment when we don't properly steward our resources might not be what the mainstream media portrays. You may have heard about these Canadian wildfires going on and all the smoke and pollution that is happening. And let me show you a CNN article. You can click on it below from June 29th called Canada's Wildfires Smoke Great Lakes on Thursday. And so let's first look at how they are portraying it using these 15 tools of learning that we're always practicing. They use the tool of naming. A code red alert warning of unhealthy air quality was issued for most of the Midwest and Ohio Valley on Wednesday, according to airnow.gov. Next, CNN uses the tool of comparison. Chicago had the worst air quality among major cities in the world early Thursday, according to IQ Air. The air in Washington, D.C., Minneapolis, Detroit, and New York City are among the top 10 most polluted. And then they use the tool of memory. For those who have to be outside, disposable respirators like N95s or P100s will help if worn correctly, Air Now says. And I pulled that out because I remember when any mask would help you not get COVID. So they seem to have changed their tune now. Maybe they are following the science. However, how they're portraying what's going on with these pollution related to these wildfires, they don't go back to the root cause, and that is man's poor stewardship of the forests in Canada. There are historical, proven ways to manage forests. So these crazy forest fires and all these pollution or all this pollution that they put into the air does not happen. But they refuse to do these simple techniques because of Green New Deal like policies and procedures. So they tell you with one side of their mouth that we should stop using fossil fuels, which is in about 90% of consumer products. There's some derivative of fossil fuels in it. It's be really economically impossible to get rid of fossil fuels any sort of time frame. But in the meantime, things that actually impact pollution and the environment, like properly stewarding our forests, are ignored in exchange for these ideas. Properly stewarding our forests would have a greater impact on the environment than all of these initiatives that they are pushing from unelected bureaucrats and three-letter organizations from around the world that have little to nothing to do with man's impact on the environment and what we can do to make sure that we all have clean air and clean water available to everyone. So keep using the 15 tools of learning to see what the media is trying to portray, and then use your common sense and wisdom to see what's actually happening. You probably know at Classical Conversations, our goal is to equip homeschool parents to give their children the best education possible. What you might not know is that we have established relationships with other parties that offer educational support and advancement services, extracurricular support, family, culture, Christian colleges, university choices, missions, and gap year opportunities, and much, much more. CC members receive exclusive access to discounts and promotions with many of these organizations. To view the full list of our third-party relationships as well as discounts that are available to your family, simply visit classicalconversations.com/relationships. That's classicalconversations.com/relationships to get your discounts today. For our crypto segment today, I want to dispel two myths, and I think this article will do that for you. Myth one is that there's no use for crypto, and myth two is that it's anonymous. So, cryptonews.com has an article. It starts off, a Russian citizen has been arrested for allegedly sending crypto to Ukraine's armed forces and will be tried on treason charges. So when the war first broke out, the Ukraine was trying to raise funds to buy ammunition and fight against Russia. And they did this through a lot of crypto, trying to bring in funds from other places. And it's a great way to move money cross borders. So when people say there is no use for crypto, the Ukraine war is obviously a way of saying, no, there is one. We've been using it to fight a battle. Ukrainian citizens also used it to try to get funds out of the country if they were fleeing, and individuals from other countries who may have had friends in Ukraine used crypto to send them money so that they would be able to transact locally. So that myth can be easily dispelled. The second myth is that it's traceable or not traceable, and it's anonymous. So in one sense, it is anonymous because you have a large string that identifies yourself, and a lot of times there's not a direct link to an individual person. They do have a thing now called KYC, know your customer, and so a lot of crypto platforms are being forced by governments to get your ID and verify who you are before giving you a soft wallet so that they can then trace back. The other thing to think about is it's triple entry accounting. So when we talk about crypto, the technology is fully auditable. So we can see who's sending what to where. Now it's just a string of code, but when you have that KYC or know your customer, you're able to really tie those two people together. Or even if you have an account without a KYC, there's other ways of tracing it back to who actually made the transaction and who collected the money. So right there, we see if Russia is able to arrest someone for sending money to the Ukraine, that it is not, in fact, an anonymous way of transacting business. So we can compare that to two other things. One, on January 6th, Bank of America sent to the federal government anybody who was in DC that they could trace to DC that had previously purchased weapons or guns, and gave that list to the government. So we already see that there's that opportunity to have digital currency or credit cards, which is transacted digitally, and provide information about you to government authorities. So really the only anonymous way right now is still cash to conduct business in a way that is very difficult to trace. But even that could look at your thumbprint or fingerprints to try to eventually trace that back to you. So if you think this is a good thing or a bad thing, that's up to you. But let us just dispel the myths that it's untraceable and that it has no use. And we can just put those to bed and continue pushing forward with this new technology and understanding finance.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortons. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation, and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.